Ready for a deep dive? We're diving into some pretty unconventional financial wisdom today.
Yeah, we're going to unpack this interview with Cody Sanchez. She, throws the rule book out when it comes to building wealth. And get this, her whole philosophy, it kind of comes from feeling financially controlled early on. Remember that whole thing about her mom, monitoring her spending in college? It's kind of wild. So that experience really lit a fire in Sanchez. She craved that true financial independence, which she actually defines as freedom. Powerful stuff, right? And it kind of led her to challenge this advice we hear all the time, just save. Sanchez is like, nope, simply saving won't make you rich. Instead, she's all about earning more as a crucial first step. It's about shifting that mindset, from scarcity to abundance, realizing you can create more wealth instead of just trying to hold on to what you have. And she's a huge advocate for negotiating your salary. Something I think those people, myself included, we shy away from it, right? She even says, go for it. Negotiate those bonuses tied to your performance goals.
It's about knowing what you're worth and honestly, not being afraid to ask for it. That really hit home for me because let's be real, how many of us actually feel confident, truly confident negotiating our salaries? Not many, I bet. It's a skill though, right? It's something we should all try to develop. So this leads us to Sanchez's core belief. It's not just about earning more, it's about making that money work for you. And she breaks it down into three main things. First up, you gotta maximize that current earning potential, just like we were saying with the whole negotiating thing. Second, think outside the box when it comes to compensation. Don't just fixate on a higher salary, explore other avenues, what about equity? Or bonuses tied to the company's success, or even profit sharing, anything that kind of connects your income, directly to your impact. Now her third point, investing in cash flowing assets. Forget the whole risky startup scene, especially when you're just starting out. Sanchez learned this firsthand, and her example of her very first business, a laundromat of all things. It really illustrates this point perfectly. It wasn't glamorous by any means. It cost her $100,000 and get this, generated $67,000 a year. But here's the thing, it gave her invaluable experience and crucially, consistent cash flow. That story really resonated with me, It shows how sometimes you gotta be willing to start small, learn the ropes before you go big. Sanchez is all about building that strong foundation before you take on any serious risk. She actually suggests that investing in startups is more of a game for when you've got more capital to play with. Her point is, you have to understand the level of risk involved at each stage of your wealth building journey. Now, this isn't to say that Sanchez is discouraging ambition or dreaming big. Not at all. It's about being strategic about it. She really emphasizes that what gets you to $100,000, it's not necessarily going to be what gets you to that $10 million mark. You have to, at some point, shift gears. Be willing to take calculated risks and understand how to really leverage your money. So for anyone out there who's new to this whole business ownership thing, but you still like that idea of investing in something, established, Sanchez actually has some really cool thoughts on franchises. She sees them as a great starting point, especially for beginners. Why? Well, you're basically buying into a system that already works, right? It's like a pre-made blueprint for success. You get that established brand recognition, the marketing, even operational support, which, let's be honest, can be super valuable when you don't have tons of experience. She even specifically mentions trade service franchises, your window cleaning, your pressure washing. Those everyday services, she says they're really resilient, especially during economic downturns. Makes sense, right? People always need those essential services. Plus, these kinds of businesses, they usually have that recurring revenue stream that Sanchez is always talking about. Okay, but let's say you're feeling adventurous. You want to dive head first into buying an existing business. Well, Sanchez, being the practical guru she is, she actually has this whole 10-step process. It boils down to due diligence. Really knowing what you're getting into before you jump in. Oh, and this is important. Not being afraid to walk away if something feels off. In fact, you know what Sanchez talks about? Her biggest business regret. It actually came from a deal gone wrong, and get this, it wasn't even about the money. It ended up ruining friendship, which is rough. And it really highlights this crucial point she makes. Doing business with friends and family, it's tricky. You need to go in with your eyes wide open, have those super clear expectations from the get-go, and maybe most importantly, make sure your values line up to avoid, potential disaster. It gets you thinking about relationships in general, right? Speaking of which, Sanchez and her husband, they have a pretty unique approach to finances and their life goals in general. Every year, they do this thing, it's actually kind of cool. They call it a vision boarding session. Basically, they just sit down together and map out their ideal lifestyle. And get this, we're not just talking dollar signs here. They factor in everything. Travel, personal growth, how much time they want to spend with family. They're really trying to build a life together, not just chase some random financial finish line. And you know what else is cool? They're all about this idea of like a strength-based relationship. Basically, they each focus on their own skills and passions instead of getting stuck in those like traditional roles. She even mentions that she actually likes to clean, which I thought was kind of refreshing. This whole approach really stood out to me. It's about designing your relationship in a way that lets you both grow, personally and professionally. Sanchez and her husband, they seem to have figured out the system, acknowledging each other's strengths, open communication, setting clear expectations. It's honestly a breath of fresh air when it comes to like how we think about partnerships. And this whole emphasis on who you surround yourself with, it goes way beyond romantic relationships. Remember that term Sanchez used? Energy vampires? That she's talking about those people who just like drain you, without giving much back. I think we've all met a few of those energy zappers in our lives, so what's her advice? Recognize those energy vampires and step back. It's about being aware of your own energy and honestly who you let into your life. This applies to like both your personal and professional life. You want those people around you who really support you, challenge you to be better, all that good stuff. Sanchez, she actually shares this really powerful visualization exercise. It's designed to help you figure out your values, what actually matters to you most. So imagine this, it's your last day on earth. Knowing that, what would your perfect day look like? And what kind of legacy would you want to leave behind? It's kind of heavy, right? But it really makes you think. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, but this exercise forces you to like zoom out, look at that big picture. If your time was limited, how would you actually spend it? What would actually matter in the grand scheme of things? It's a big question, but I think it's one we should all ask ourselves. And you know what? That whole idea of living a life with purpose, it really seems to be at the heart of what Sanchez is talking about. It's not just about like money, money, money. It's about figuring out what you believe in and making sure your actions like match those values. And honestly trying to make a difference, It actually reminded me of that quote by Mary Oliver. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Sanchez is kind of pushing us to really confront that question. Financially, yeah, but also personally. Oh, and she doesn't shy away from those like kind of uncomfortable topics either. Remember when she's talking about like men feeling threatened by women who earn more? That really stuck with me. She's calling out those old school societal norms around money and relationships. Like, head on. Sanchez's point is a man's worth. It shouldn't just be about his paycheck, right? It's about finding a partner who gets you, supports your ambitions, and brings their own strengths to the table. It's about viewing those relationships as a true partnership, a team. Not some kind of competition or like sticking to those outdated gender rules. And speaking of relationships, I thought her advice about communication was spot on. She's big on being upfront about what you want, what you expect. Especially when it comes to things like money and ambition. Honesty is key. No way around it. Sometimes it's about having those tough conversations just to make sure you're both on the same page. This kind of ties into that whole choosing sides thing she talked about. Now, she's not talking politics or anything like that. She's talking about standing by your values. Being loyal to the people who matter most, even when it's hard. Integrity is a big thing for Sanchez. Doing the right thing, even when it's not the easy thing. That's important to her. And sometimes doing the right thing means, having those tough conversations we were talking about. Setting boundaries. Maybe even walking away from relationships that aren't helpful anymore. It's about building a strong support system, right? Surrounding yourself with those people who'll be there no matter what. And, being able to spot those energy vampires we talked about. It all comes full circle. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Cody Sanchez's, let's call it unconventional wisdom, I keep coming back to that question she asked. What would your tombstone say if it reflected a life you were actually proud of? It's powerful, right? It makes you think about your legacy, what you want to leave behind, what impact you want to have. Sanchez reminds us that life, it's short. And yeah, financial success, it's great, but it's not the whole picture. It's about figuring out what you value, going after your passions, and really trying to make a difference. So what will your legacy be?